Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking edition of the Map Round Show. This is the Secrets of Fail series where we're talking to entrepreneurs and CEOs all about their epic business blunders. And with me in the hot seat today is none other than the man, the legend, Andrew Petersen, the CEO of Bluefin Data. Andrew, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, it's great, dude. So you know the format. So let's get on with the meat and the potatoes of this one. What is the elevator pitch? What are you up to there at Bluefin Data?
So we are collecting data on the oceans and the wildlife within them, and we are using that data and providing it to scientists so that they can better make better decisions about the economics and the sustainability of the environment. And so we are essentially that bridge between industry members such as fishermen, seafood dealers, and fishery managers and environmentalists.
How did this business come about?
So it fell in my lap, actually. I was a professional poker player back in 2010, and I was looking around for a different career path and looked at my father and said, "Hey, what do you do again in the seafood industry?" And something related to technology. And so I started just kind of learning the business domain, answering customer support calls, and then I became a programmer, and really that dovetailed into becoming more of the business development and then eventually CEO. So I got into it and I absolutely love it. I was fishing, or at least I used to fish growing up, but I really fell in love with the oceans whenever I started doing it as a career.
Yep. Well, it's a mission-driven problem that you're trying to solve, dude. I mean, figuring out how many fish is in the ocean is it's an impossible task, right? But having insights at all into that is actually really important for sustainable food provision, or at least seafood and stuff. And there's all this talk I've been hearing for years about the depletion of fish in the oceans, and there's economies around this and businesses and people and families and livelihoods. So I think you're doing a worthy thing. So keep at it.
Yeah. It's fun. It's exciting because we get to apply some of the technology that's coming out that really a lot of the seafood and fishing industry as a whole doesn't really use.
Yeah.
And so we get to kind of be the ones to bring this new tool or this new solution to a problem that's existed for years. So it is really satisfying.
Awesome, brother. Well, look, let's get into the meat of this episode. What is your epic story of fail today?
So I've failed with growth because I didn't actually I wasn't the founder of the company. I've essentially taken something that it has a market product fit, but the growth problem has always been a problem, or at least something that I've struggled with. And really, my big first struggle was finding the right people for our team. And that was totally my fault. So we grew to about 5 employees. And then one day it sort of hit me that I needed to fire everybody. So we essentially hit restart on the company and I started back from scratch. And looking back on it, really, it wasn't anybody that I had hired. It was my fault for the lack of guidance on what needed to be done, how it needed to be done. And kind of setting what the expectations were is really where I failed. And so after we pushed restart, I was able to take a lot of the heartburn and the challenge, or I guess the pain from that experience of letting everybody go, to really start focusing on what I wanted whenever I was going to hire again. And so now the benefits I've reaped from that is I can unplug from the business for 2 weeks and things work. I come back and maybe there's 1 or 2 things that need my attention too. But really, I've created kind of this living organism that can kind of develop itself and run without too much input. Now, there are still aspects of the company that depend on me. So more of the business development side now depends on me. So if I do disappear for a couple of weeks, we don't get much progress there. But I've used that as kind of the standard or the structure that any future growth that we have going forward, I can kind of use that. So it's definitely been a learning lesson and a lot of pain, but it's good.
Mm-hmm. So, what did this experience teach you? I'm curious to understand, like, what was the spark that when you said you woke up one morning and I was like, hey, I actually need to get rid of everybody and rebuild this thing? Like, why was that? And what did that process of rebuilding teach you?
So I think it was whenever I realized that I had to redo so much work whenever I would delegate something out. I would just say, hey, do this. Um, I would get whatever that end result was and just not be satisfied and not feel like it was up to my standards. And then I would just have to recreate it. And another thing I noticed is whenever the employees started doing things that weren't necessarily part of their role or their task, and I like surfing social media, just like, am I doing something wrong, or are they bored, or are they in the wrong profession? And so those sorts of signs of like quality wasn't there, but then also the focus or the passion from those that worked with me wasn't there. So I think that's really what woke me up to, hey, there's a problem.
So if you could get into the Matt Brown Show time machine and kind of go back in time and do things differently, what would you do differently, if anything, and why, Andrew?
I would do a lot more preparation when it comes to hiring. And so documenting out exactly what your expectations are, what the standards are, and in a way that helps AU internally, but it also helps the people that are coming on board because they have clarity into what you're thinking, and to have an actual physically written down somewhere typically is better than just verbally mentioning it, just because you can miss so much whenever it's just verbal. And whenever you have something that you can kind of read and sit down and really consume, I feel like that's better than just a 30-minute or an hour interview and you try and fit everything in within that hour.
Yeah.
So definitely writing down and having it available to whoever you might be interviewing.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I find we don't do it, right? We just don't actually start to document how we actually deliver something from A to B. So it's sitting in a lot of our minds, right? So it's part of the process sitting in this person, another one sitting in that one. And so when you hire, and especially if you start scaling quickly, that becomes a real headache, right? So it's like, well, how do I do my job? It's like, I don't know, you got to talk to Joe and then, Simon and Susan, and then you must figure it out, and it's a typical startup stage, isn't it? So like, up to 15 people. And we don't, we don't take the time to invest in something that doesn't feel like it's a worthwhile initiative. But as you said, it's a necessity in order to start that scaling process. So you go from 15 to 50. Like there's a lot of processes, a lot of systems that have to be involved, and everybody needs to be singing off the same hymn sheet, right? It can't be like, well, I have to go have 5 meetings just to do one job,
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually find it helps me better solidify what I want. And so it's just like we talk about mission statement. We talk about all these like quick phrases that we want to spout off when somebody asks us. And a lot of times, if I haven't sat down to actually think about it, it's like it changes every time. And it's just like it's this variation. And to me, it's like I can't really say I've thought something through until I've actually written it down. And it's almost like at times I'm writing so that I can think instead of the other way around. It's just like actually documenting it down is really what solidifies it in my mind.
Yeah. One of the hardest things I found to do this job, like there's other, like HR, there's, performance management, there's maybe, product or technology development process. Like that stuff's actually relatively easy to document once and then keep it really, pretty much the same. But the one piece that I found in this particular context of documenting SOPs and stuff like that is sales. So if you're in a services business, it's the sales piece is always changing because you're always trying to increase prices, or you're trying to change the value proposition, trying to, create revenue faster. You're moving into different industries, or if you're talking to a different decision maker, then everything changes. So it's kind of like, especially if you're up to like 50 people. When you're at 300, then things tend to, be a little bit more stable. But up to about 50 people, like that one piece, it's like like if I document it today and I do a screen, listen here, this is how you you sell this thing to this customer. Like literally the next day I have to redo it because it's changing so fast and you're introducing new products. And now it's like, no, but now you got to change the whole sales process, and I found that particular piece like super frustrating.
Yeah. And that's funny you mentioned that because that's some of the processes that I'm documenting.
Yeah, good luck.
Just because I've always kind of known it, but yeah, you're right though. As I start thinking about like the directions that we're going to go, I can see how the customers are going to vary. The market, the strategy, it's all going to vary.
Yeah, it's product and services. I think more services than product, because like products, unless you have like a complete user interface updates, it's kind of like you can get away with a lot of the training, and the internal stuff. But the services stuff, because it's services and there's lots of moving parts and like there's cost calculators and profit margins and it's actually quite complex. And I found that so good luck. So Andrew, what's your advice to CEOs and entrepreneurs out there in terms of the importance of failing in business success?
Oh, I think it's for those that have children. At least for me, I have a daughter that is about to be 4. It's always been such a challenge, but also such a joy. And I feel like business is very similar to where the failure is critical, and that's the challenge. That's the hard part. It's the part where you're tensing every muscle in your body, and just kind of closing your eyes and hoping that it ends. But then on the other side is the pure joy. And like whenever my daughter's like sweet and kind, it's just like it's almost like you forget about that challenge or that failure that you had, and it's just like pure bliss or pure joy. And I don't think I would want it any other way, to where you like didn't have either. Like I almost feel like it's kind of critical to have the failure in order to have the blissful, joyful moments. And so at least for me, as I've gone through the various failures or challenges in life, I've always felt that essentially that is the price that you have to pay for the blissful, joyful moments. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I look at it, as it's essential to have the failure in order to have the joy.
Yeah. You can't have the yin without the yang, dude. You know what I'm saying? You can't have the white with no black. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, even if you have even when you get out of the survival stage and you hit like 300 feet, like it's a different type of pain. You know what I'm saying? It's still pain. You know what I mean? Like, okay, cool. You got a Ferrari, but you're still dealing with a massive, thing that if you mismanage it, especially financially, it just, impounds at speed. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, now you're responsible for 300 people, not just your own. And so, you can never get away. Yeah.
I imagine it's a different joy too.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's just
too.
like, it's like, yes, whenever you're at 300 people, you have different problems, but also the joy that you get out of having 300 people in your company is probably very different, just because you have so many more people that you get that satisfaction from. Whereas in the past, or at least whenever you're smaller, it's just like it's a different pain. It's just
yeah, it's a horrible pain. I think it's worse up front. That's why you don't document anything, because you're doing it all.
You don't want to know. You don't remember that.
Yeah, totally. I'm doing it today. What are you doing? Sales, marketing, HR, product design, commercial modeling, all in one day. Yep. Cool, brother. So look, do you recommend any books or tools or resources for entrepreneurs to use on their journey?
So the book I would recommend is Good to Great by Jim Collins. I think it's a fantastic book. It talks about essentially figuring out what your focus is and just doubling down on that focus and making sure that you're really good at it. And that's always been a model that I've looked at. For those in the South, we have Raising Cane's, who started here in Louisiana, and their focus is just on making the best chicken in the world. And a lot of people thought that they were crazy for going that path, but it definitely paid off in the past, or today it's paid off for them. And so I've kind of taken that as something that I've wanted to focus on. Is there are a lot of shiny objects out there, and I think focus is king. Is starting to really narrow down and become the best of the world at what you do.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And on that bombshell, Andrew, it's time to end your time in the hot seat. Appreciate you for being on the show, dude. And, listen, you're on a mission, man. And I think the guys who are on a mission are the ones that tend to succeed more than others. So, keep doing what you're doing, and, wishing you and the team all the very best for the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.
Anytime.